All right. I know we have a lot to cover in the hour, so why don't we get started? Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Steinkamp, and I'm the Executive Director of Mountain Towns 2030. I'm based in Boulder, Colorado, and I just want to say thank you for being here this morning for this amazing conversation about wildfire resilience. Obviously, wildfire has become one of the defining challenges facing mountain communities today. And while most of the discussion has been focused on emergency response, today's conversation is about something a little bit different: prevention, resilience, and the unique leadership role that ski resorts and utilities play, and utility providers play in this whole thing. So today we're going to explore what leadership looks like, what's working, what stronger partnerships can help protect our mountain communities, and what those are. So we have a great crew here today of resort leaders, utility leaders that are going to give you some really good perspectives on their work, and hopefully will help influence kind of the work that you do by learning about some of their best practices. So we have John Nicols from the Sun Valley Ski Resort, Jan Smidek from JMA Ventures, which owns Homewood and Red Lodge Resort, Ricky Newberry from Vail Resorts, who's currently in Kirkwood, and Cody O'Neill from Holy Cross Energy. So thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate it. Let's get started with some questions. Maybe I should start off with the group. When you think about wildfire today, what has changed most over the last decade in how your organization approaches the challenge? So any one of you guys, just feel free to jump in.
I think, Chris, thanks for that. So Cody O'Neill, President of Operations for Holy Cross Energy. We're in Glenwood, Colorado. We're about 60 miles west of Vail and 45 miles northwest of Aspen. We have the good fortune to serve those two areas. And I think over the last decade or so, what has changed for us from a wildfire perspective are, I would say, two key things. Fires are getting bigger and more prevalent than they were 10 years ago, for sure, but are also giving us an opportunity to think about what is our approach and what can we do differently to minimize the chance that as a utility company, we are not the source of ignition. And there's a lot of different things that utility companies can do. The challenge is, as with most solutions, they all cost money. And how can we implement solid solutions that give us tangible results, but also allow us to continue to keep our rates low? So just changing that mindset and that framework has been really key for us during the last decade.
Thanks, Cody.
Happy to take next, Chris. So I think for us, again, Jan Smidek with JMA Ventures, the owners of Homewood and Red Lodge. For us, it's kind of three different buckets, I think, that changed over the last decade. The first one is, I think, the one that's familiar to everybody, which is we moved from kind of the seasonal operating risk to really year-round effort. I think, we used to talk about wildfires, here in California, especially starting in August and into the fall. Now it's truly year-round, and it's kind of year-round thinking about investment planning and kind of how it shapes what we do throughout the year, through the budgeting cycle, so on and so forth. Bucket number two is really the economic signal that's coming to us through insurance has become just very strong. It's become, hard to ignore, and that's kind of forced not just us, but our capital partners, lenders, to kind of think about wildfire resilience in a much more tangible fashion. And then lastly, and I know we'll talk more about that, is technology, and just how do we deploy technology to kind of create the cycle of detection, quick response, and kind of learning from that. So those are kind of the three things that really tangibly changed over the last decade plus.
Thanks, Jan. I wanted to remind everybody before we get too far, if you have a question, we're going to try to answer them throughout, but we'll definitely leave time at the end to answer all of your questions, given how much time we have. So feel free to just enter them in the Q&A toolbar, and we'll get to as many as we can. Did anybody else want to speak?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'll hop in. Yeah, thanks. Hello, Ricky Newberry here, General Manager of Kirkwood Mountain Resort. And I had the experience of living and working through the Caldor fire in 2021, being evacuated from my home in Christmas Valley, which no structures were lost. They call it the Christmas Valley miracle, but there's some good evidence of all the fire preparedness and defensible space that was created to save that community. And then, yeah, working in the community that had impacts to Sierra Tahoe, Heavenly, and Kirkwood. And I'll anchor back to that a lot through today's conversation, just that experience and forward looking, how we've taken some of those responses and turned them into best practices across our enterprise. I think the biggest change has been recognizing that wildfire resilience is something we all share responsibility for. Where a decade ago, the conversation was often more focused on an individual response, and perhaps that we were a bit immune to wildfire in an alpine environment like here at Kirkwood. And today, there's a much greater understanding that healthy forests and resilient communities all require partnership through the resorts, the utilities, all the fire agencies that we work with, emergency responders, and then residents. Like we have a great FireWise program here in the community of Kirkwood, and it's all working together. So yeah, our role is to be a responsible partner in that effort by supporting the healthy forests, helping educate our guests and residents here in the community, and working together with others who share the commitment to protecting the places we love.
Thanks, Ricky. Maybe I just wanted to ask you another question, just getting into some of the details about how Vail Resorts approaches wildfires, and obviously at Kirkwood as well. How has wildfire risk changed the way Vail thinks about operating ski areas? And what investments have had the biggest impact on reducing wildfire risk?
Yeah, good questions. Wildfire resilience has become just an increasingly important part of how we think about operating our resorts. Not just protecting our own operations, but about working together to support the health and the resilience of, the places that we call home, live, and work. Wildfire resilience requires a year-round commitment, as Jan said. Like that's how we're approaching our business. And as a ski resort, we're uniquely positioned to be a part of that effort because of our ongoing presence in the environments. And then as far as investments go, efforts like fuels reduction and vegetation management have helped support healthier forests and increase wildfire resilience. We've got a strong summer crew that does a lot of hazard tree work. And then we also hire third parties to come in and help us out with that. We bought a wood mill a while back, which is pretty cool. And so we'll take a lot of that tree, the trees that we felled, and we'll put them through the mill, and we'll repurpose that for things like snow fence. And then any extra wood that we have, we go ahead and we give that to the Washoe tribe in a Firewood for Elders campaign. So that's all pretty cool. But I think it's all about building the strong relationships and maintaining open lines of communication and planning together for any proactive mitigation and emergency response. We have been hosting an annual wildfire preparedness meeting at Heavenly at the Cal base with all the fire agencies, Forest Service, Cal Fire, California, Nevada teams, and then all the resort operators from the Tahoe Basin are invited to come to and just connect, share information. And interestingly enough, in 2021, it was the week before the Tamarack fire happened here in Alpine County, and then a couple months before Caldor happened. And we've really found that to be just a great investment in time and connection.
That really plays into this whole idea that ski resorts can, obviously play a role beyond their own boundaries as kind of the hub for kind of this partnership that you just spoke about.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're all in it together.
For sure. John, it's Sun Valley Ski Resort. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you're doing in Sun Valley and kind of the role that, Sun Valley plays in kind of the larger ecosystem in the area?
Yeah, for sure. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, my name is John. I'm with Sun Valley up here in Idaho. I'm primarily working in the grooming the trails and the capital project, boots on the ground avenue. So, our large effort, we have a threefold effort I would sum it up into, but our large effort that we're most well recognized for right now is what's called the Bald Mountain Stewardship Project. And that project, a long time ago, I'm benefiting from the fruits near the end here, but a long time ago it was built out of the necessity with two large wildfires that came right up to the ski area boundary, and the community, along with the local agency, Forest Service and BLM and Sun Valley, and a lot of community members, they came together, and we really focused on keeping the mountain healthy, and by keeping the mountain healthy, we're reducing fuels. We're having healthy trees, and we're getting obviously a ski benefit. We are a resort operator, and it helps us. But our big push that we've been doing for a handful of years now is looking at fuels reduction. And we go in, we're removing timber, we're hauling the timber off, much like Ricky talked about. We have some great partnerships with local tribes where Wood for Life and the National Forest Foundation has been a great partner with us, and they are bringing a ton of this wood to the tribes, and they're helping, project coordination, project management. So we're not doing it by ourselves. I mean, we have some great partners that are helping us out, both within the community and within the agencies and some nonprofits. But, for us, it's really focusing on the fuels reduction. So, we have more defensible space, so to speak. And, this year and this project, we actually had a portion where we were able to focus on reducing fuels in an area that's not within our ski area boundary, it's within our mountain. But we actually are reducing fuels, and we're actively, starting to chip some of the slash today as I speak. But this certain area we focused on for the sole purpose of how first responders could access the mountain and have a safe way off of the mountain if they were to have an incident where they were fighting wildfire, either to engage it or to evacuate. So looking at it at that way too. The other thing, that we talk about, and specifically that I'm involved in as just the operations side and not necessarily the master planning, is our snowmaking preparedness. So we talk every single day. If we're taking a pump house down for a project, if we have to take a fire hydrant out of service on the mountain, we as a mountain team here are always talking about what our availability is to water and to resources for first responders if we were to need them. And so the status of our water and our snowmaking system is a very big thing that we think about all summer long, which is traditionally, the time was where we take all this infrastructure down and maintain it. But it's becoming more of a question, every single day, that what is our readiness if we were to need it, which is definitely a change from the past. And then, but like Ricky said, we're in a similar boat as a resort operator. We are fortunate to meet with our first responders in the community. And what we found is they are so much more interested in what we have going on and willing to help support us. And they just want to know what's going on and how to safely access the area in case we need their help. And we've needed their help, many times. So, that relationship with our local EMS is something we focused on the last few years, where we just sit down in the spring and kind of lay out what our projects are, what our access routes are looking like, and what days things could look a little different that would hinder a response. So really just trying to have the outreach of the community to know what we're doing and how to get up here and help us if we need it, because like everyone said, it's a community effort. It's not, we're not just here to protect the ski area boundary. It's a lot more than that.
Amazing, John. Thank you. Would you say that level of community-wide partnership is something that you probably weren't doing 10 years ago? I mean, has it kind of evolved into something that's a big part of your business now or your work?
Yeah. Like I said, I've got to be a beneficiary of the tail end of a lot of the massive work that was done before me. But the community here, due to the fire, I believe it was the Castle Rock fire up here in this community, that got so close to us. And it really, obviously it was detrimental to the vegetation that it burned, but, it introduces the things that come after a wildfire, such as, disease in trees and some other stuff. So, the ski areas, as we all know, they're often spectacles for the community that comes to use them. And they really have a lot of passion for what we're doing and what we look like often. And so, the community was so involved in helping us to want to take care and make Bald Mountain like more defensible and healthy for generations to come. And so, I think, every year it grows and grows and grows. And we have a lot of great partners that have lived here a long time that are just as passionate, if not more, about what the ski area is and what it looks like. And so we have a lot of big community meetings up here. Our big ones are our 5B, which is our county number, our restoration coalition. And, all of our partners, all of our nonprofits, we're constantly meeting twice a year just to talk about what everybody's doing for, fire preparedness projects and what we're doing to maintain this healthy forest. Because, the healthy forest is the defensible forest ultimately.
Amazing. Thanks, John. Jan, let's talk about Homewood and Red Lodge. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you're doing? Obviously, you come at this from a little bit of a different perspective, working for JMA Ventures. So I'd love to hear kind of how your work, what your work is all about in terms of helping the resorts get prepared.
So I think probably a little bit different story for each of the resorts. On the Homewood side, I think kind of the distinguishing factor is that we're undergoing a decade-long development plan that's been even longer in the making. And so as we think about wildfire resilience, we're kind of really thinking about it at the intersect of the operating resort and the real estate development. And oftentimes development is kind of seen as adding wildfire risk or fire exposure, but in our view, it also creates a lot of opportunities, ranging from helping to economically support the development, creating new defensible space, providing areas of refuge, adding some of the technologies that I referenced earlier to kind of help with monitoring, et cetera. So for us, we're really kind of thinking about it from these two angles, and I think kind of the key unlock here is really thinking about or starting to think about resilience from the get-go as part of the design, right? So as opposed to planning a village, planning new buildings, and then kind of slapping resilience at the end, we're really thinking about it from the get-go. And as I mentioned, the insurance signal has been present there from all along. So we ask ourselves questions as we are thinking about designing a new part of the village. How does this fit into the overall wildfire evacuation and life safety plan in the future? How do certain decisions we make, from the use of different paints to the pathing, how does it fit into how an insurance would view what we're doing here? So it has just become an integral part of how we develop it and how the real estate development then integrates with the operations. And I think we also just go beyond just code compliance. I think it's kind of obviously that's the table stakes, but we do think about how do we create these kind of win-win situations where, in our prep call, we talked about we're implementing security, kind of perimeter security system, and how can you use that technology for multi-uses? How can you use those cameras to not only serve as a security measure, but how can you use them to provide early detection of wildfires? So a lot of thinking goes into kind of these multi-use. We all know capital budgets are not limitless, and so how do we hit two birds with one stone in these types of situations?
Thank you, Jan. That brings up a really good point. Obviously, it sounds like you're really involved in those early conversations about investment decisions, which is probably something that wasn't done 5 years ago, right?
Yeah, they were done, but I think not as comprehensively. I think the investment decisions here, as I mentioned, they're really kind of becoming a year-round effort, and they're focused from really kind of from the get-go. So you're really incorporating those decisions from the beginning of the process, and it's kind of figuring out. Also, I think one other concept here that we kind of really think about a lot is just in many ways, ski resorts have been thought 5-10 years ago as just this massive acreage on a map, right? And how do you kind of treat that acreage? I think we're starting to think about it more as almost kind of the operating platform relative to the wildfire resilience, right? It's not just the snowmaking systems and the potential wildfire breaks. It's the team that knows the mountain, that's connected to the community, can provide the early detection. It's not just a passive land acreage. It's an active platform that can then help the community fight the wildfires. And so when we think about investments, we're not just thinking about the tangible CapEx investments. We're thinking about the team and improving the capabilities of the team that can then play a key role in responding to wildfires. I think that's probably kind of the big change in the last several years.
Yeah, yesterday I think it was you that mentioned about this hub of refuge. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that was really interesting to me.
Certainly. I mean, as we we've seen in certain fires. You mentioned the Palisades fire, obviously in LA, but it's true in other wildfires, and mountain communities are no strangers to that. The evacuation routes are pretty limited, and in Lake Tahoe, where Homewood is located, that's certainly the case. And so, big element of how we're thinking about Homewood and how the community and the fire district thinks about Homewood is also using the defensible space that the resort creates to provide area of refuge. That's always only kind of additive to evacuation, but in case of evacuation limitations, the area can serve as an area of refuge. So as we think about the design of it, that certainly plays a key role. I mentioned technology a few times already, but as part of our effort, we're, for example, working with an Israeli startup called Fire Dome that kind of uses essentially early detection technology, and then deploys, what's effectively kind of water capsules, shoots essentially water capsules towards a fire. Where we just signed an agreement with them. We're going to be doing a pilot with them later this summer and fall to kind of really test out their technology. They've deployed it in other locations, and so we're always on the lookout for how can we do some of these things more innovatively and kind of stretch our capital investments further, and play a bigger role in the protection of the community.
Amazing. Thank you. Cody, let's talk about utilities for a minute. Obviously, Holy Cross Energy is a big player, obviously, here in Colorado, and would love to learn more about kind of the way you all are approaching wildfires, given the fact that you serve so many ski resorts as well.
Sure. So I think one of the biggest things that we've taken this time and the opportunity to do is to rethink how we're functioning as a utility company. Utility companies have done what we do generally the same way for decades now. And the technology, I think you've heard here, a common theme is technology use and partnerships. So how can we utilize and leverage those two things to provide our service to our community in a different way, in a better way? That comes down to construction practice, for one. Are the same old construction practices really the right solution for the problems that face us today and the challenges that face us today? I think the short answer to that is no. There's a lot of other better ways that utilities can go about construction practices. A common theme is, well, all electric utility companies should just put everything underground. And that it's a very viable solution in an upfront planning perspective. If a new development is planned, underground electric is a great way to go. In an existing infrastructure scenario where everything is already overhead, especially up here in the mountains, I would suspect the Sierra in California and up in Idaho are very similar. Digging is not always easy. So to dig after the fact is even harder and more expensive. So what can we do with the utilities that we already have overhead? And technology plays a huge part in that for us. We've been utilizing a common term in the utility industry now, I think coined by PG&E possibly, is enhanced power line safety settings. Essentially, what we're doing is we're operating the system in a way that is reducing the incident energy potential, essentially the sparks that can be created during a fault, which reduces wildfire risk. We can implement those technologies across our system now, which really allows us to have a little bit better peace of mind during those high fire danger days. So then that brings us to how can we use technology to tell us when are the high fire danger days there and when are they not present. We've had an extremely warm and dry year here in Colorado. So we've been in our fire settings mode, or that enhanced power safety settings mode, for weeks now. However, the monsoon has finally arrived, and we haven't been as high fire danger the last couple weeks. So that allows us to operate in a normal mode, which means our outages are going to be less frequent, and they're going to be shorter when we do have outages. So looking at how we can use technology to reduce wildfire risk. How can we adjust our construction practices to reduce wildfire risk? And then kind of the third item here is the partnerships from a utility perspective. I think a lot of times utility view themselves as kind of isolated and on an island, and that's really not the case. All three of our counties that we serve here in Western Colorado have wildfire collaboratives, which are great. They're attended by local first responders, the firefighters, and they're also attended generally by community members from the government side of things, both on the town and the county side. And those are great meetings every month to be able to get everyone in the same room and discuss what are potential issues we're seeing, but more importantly, what are any kind of projects that anyone's working on, whether it's Vail Resorts up on Vail Mountain, or whether it's the Colorado State Forest Service outside the town of Basalt. And where does the utility company have rights of way that could potentially participate in that project, and that we can help do our little part in the reduction of fuels or anything like that. Because generally utility companies have managed rights of way from a reliability perspective for years. Now I think we need to start managing them also from a fuels mitigation perspective. And those are two very different things. So just taking the time and the opportunity to look at things differently, which is sometimes hard for utility companies. That's been really an eye-opening experience for us here at Holy Cross. And we're always looking to participate with the members that we serve and see how we can serve them better.
Amazing. Thank you, Cody.
Sure.
That's super helpful. I want to get into kind of a group discussion now and talk about a couple of really important topics that all of you can hopefully weigh in on. But I want to just talk about technology for a minute, and wanted to see if you could kind of share some examples of technology that you weren't using just a few years ago that's really kind of changed the way that you address wildfires. Is there some sort of a technology or an approach to utilizing existing technology, like snowmaking, for example, snowmaking systems? Is there technology that you all are really leaning heavily on as we go forward?
So I think from our perspective on the utility side, we use a AI-based fire detection camera system, but really we're participating in that program more as a community service because we're not first responders. So allowing our first responders access to those cameras has been extremely beneficial. And there's a network of cameras in the two valleys that we serve, the Eagle Valley and the Roaring Fork Valley, that really provide a fairly comprehensive view of our valleys that first responders have access to and can get notifications to straight away when a fire detection is noticed by the AI system. That's one of the areas that we're really utilizing technology. Just from a community partnership perspective.
Thank you. Great. Well, thank you. Let's talk about kind of the partnerships, because I know each one of you touched on this a little bit, but for any one of you, where have you seen the best examples of collaboration between utilities, resorts, local government, municipalities, and federal agencies?
Yeah. I can kick us off on that, and I'll anchor back to the Caldor fire experience. I really believe that's a good example of strong collaboration and like what it can accomplish. As the fire grew, coming up from west to east between Highway 50 and Highway 88, the incident command post ultimately migrated to Heavenly. We worked fast and furious to get all the agreements and contracts in place, and we did that. So, and we worked with a wide range of partners throughout that response. Kirkwood parking lots ultimately became the incident command post for helicopters. So they were all based out of here. And then, yeah, Heavenly was the primary incident command post for the fire camp, taking over the parking lots there at Cal Base. I mentioned the Christmas Valley Miracle. That was a multi-day firefight where when the crews came back to Lake Valley Station, they didn't have any food. Like the whole town had been evacuated. We had some food in Heavenly that we were able to drive there and feed the firefighters. Like that was pretty remarkable. And then, yeah, we also tapped into our resources, our communications, and our infrastructure, including repeater sites and generators. You mentioned technology and some snowmaking. Both Kirkwood and the Heavenly teams worked with the fire crews to tap into that snowmaking equipment. We actually made snow on Ridge Run at Heavenly on September 1st, which was a pretty crazy situation. But I think, yeah, it just really showed, the great collaboration and communication. It was live time. It was all happening really quick. One of the things that we learned, like we were all evacuated, but then we also needed to get essential employees back onto the mountain to partner with the fire teams to tap into our resources. So we made that happen. We can't run our snowmaking equipment without power, and the power was set to be shut down. So we were working with Liberty Utilities and Nevada Energy to keep that going for this special circumstance. So yeah, that just the collaboration experience that we were all in it together got us through with no infrastructure impact to Heavenly or Kirkwood.
Thank you, Ricky.
Can maybe
jump
just
in
Chris
there.
on.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead. I think it was John, maybe.
Yeah, I can kind of jump in on another side, kind of how we've had partnerships be so successful on our Ball Mountain stewardship project that we have is, ours definitely comes in from a pretty big planning side to where our fuels reduction that's happening on the resort, where we're obviously benefiting from great skiing as a byproduct. We're reducing fuel by pulling quite a bit of timber out, and through this process, we have our Forest Service timber crew up here, and that crew's up here often, and they're working side by side with us. I think oftentimes one thing that's shifted with ski areas is, back in the day, we would just take the trail crews out and we would just go start thinning just with the sole purpose of creating good gladed skiing. And one thing that is really evident in the partnership that was created with our local community and our Forest Service agency, as well as the BLM, and oftentimes facilitated, especially in the recent future, by the National Forest Foundation, is, we as the ski area operator and trail crew are not deciding what trees are going and how that's working anymore. What's going on is the foresters and the professionals from our contractors, which most recently has been all a company by the name of Miller Timber. We're using the expertise of both agencies and the people on the ground that do this for a living to go into these tree stands and really, look at it with the eye of a healthy forest and the professionals, and we're benefiting because ultimately their product is so great. It's incredible skiing, but these members are really facilitating how the fuels are being chosen to be removed and which ones are being removed. And and we all talk about habitat trees and healthy trees and unhealthy trees, and what's really changed in my time in the last 15 to 17 years working on ski slopes is here we have a stark difference of the professionals are really helping us out with three goals in mind, and visually is as important as health, which is as important as long-term success and skiing. And so we really lean on those partners now to help us make those decisions rather than sending our trail crew and our labor crew out there and just say let's buck these trees up and make some good skiing.
No, thank you. It seems like that kind of landscape scale forest management is kind of a group responsibility. Would everybody else on the call here today kind of agree with that? No one organization is responsible for this kind of large-scale forest management, correct?
I would, and I would maybe just add kind of to your question about partnerships and coordination. One successful program that we had in our Red Lodge Mountain in Montana was actually grants from the state that provided essentially, state provided forest management, fields removal grants that kind of served the purpose of obviously wildfire management, but also, as John mentioned, kind of created better gladed skiing. So that was just a very, I think, very good cooperation between the state and us as a private entity to achieve those dual goals. And I haven't seen that maybe happen in some of the other areas, but I'm sure this is something that's maybe kind of future of support from the state or from other public entities towards private entities to help them with forest management.
Amazing. Thank you. Just a couple more questions before we get into everyone else's questions. I want to talk a little bit about community preparedness. Obviously, that's just a very big deal. So how can resorts and utilities play a role in educating guests and residents and kind of creating this culture of shared responsibility throughout the entire community or valley, depending on where you are?
So I'll kick that one off. I think definitely from the utility perspective, how we can participate in that in the most effective way is twofold, in my opinion. Education on the part of educating the resorts, educating town managers, educating county commissioners on what the particular utilities limitations are in various types of events. And then utilizing, if the utility has its own communication staff, utilize that staff to help educate the public. Also educate PIOs, and really just helping people understand that I think just as a society, we generally take electric service for granted for the most part nowadays. And that is not always going to be the case, especially in a potential event if it occurs, and identify areas where, you might be able to partner with your town community. And as Jan mentioned earlier, identify places of refuge that will have a backup source of power in the event of an event. That is extremely important to know where those places will be and verify that the backup power source, whatever it may be, actually does function and test it on a regular basis. So that's definitely what I think can help from the utility perspective, working with the community.
Thank you, Cody. Kind of looking ahead, what innovations do you believe will have the biggest impact, obviously, or approaches? Obviously, the wildfire mitigation conversation is huge, and there's so many different approaches to mitigating wildfires and building resiliency. What kind of approaches or innovations do you think will have the biggest impact, maybe even 5 years from now?
I'll jump in. I think better tools for communication. I think we have a unique position at the ski area with social media and connectivity there, and being able to outreach to a larger audience. The data sharing, I think, collaboratively, we're all working closer together. I know the University of Nevada, Reno, in their fire program, they're propping up cameras all over the place. And we've offered, to be a venue for that. And just, partnering up to make better and more informed decisions, responding more effectively, anchoring back to the communication. But yeah, I think, strong relationships that's the foundation.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'll probably just add kind of really just, I think we touched upon it earlier, but just shortening the cycle from detection to response, right? So everything that was just mentioned plays a role in that: communication, detection, technology, all of that, but just kind of thinking about it from a framework of how do you just shorten this feedback loop, and also the learning feedback loop, kind of learning quicker. These fires are different today than they were, a few years ago. How do you kind of more quickly, through collection of data, how do you more quickly learn from one incident to the next one and disperse the data?
Thanks, Jan. And Cody, that kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier about how you're you're providing cameras to the community, not necessarily for you all, but for the community to really dial up their early detection.
Yeah, and that's a key point. I think one of the things that we come up against is just a lot of times when we talk about wildfire mitigation, some people hear wildfire prevention, and I think those are two very different concepts. And preventing wildfires, while a noble goal, is probably not gonna happen in its entirety. So how do we better respond? And those are the areas where I think technology is going to really help us in the future, along the ways that Ricky and Jan just mentioned.
Great. Thank you. I want to get to some questions. I see there's some questions in the tool, but I just wanted to ask you all one kind of last group question. If you could give every mountain community mayor, county commissioner, utility manager, or resort executive on the call today one recommendation, whether it's an investment they should make or just a recommendation for reducing wildfire risk over the next year, what would it be?
Don't wait until there's a fire to start having these conversations. I know I mentioned our pregame meeting in 2021. I felt perhaps before that the meeting was just that as a meeting, and you kind of check the box. After that experience in 2021 with Tamarack and Caldor and the Big Dixie fire up north, we had a captive audience, and this has just become the routine. So I think, just preparation, right? It's the proper prior planning approach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would echo that and maybe add, understand and exercise your emergency response plans. That is massive. I think all of us probably have those plans in a file cabinet somewhere, but how often do we exercise them? How often do we tabletop them? Make sure everyone knows what they're doing and specifically what the roles of communication and responsibility are.
Thank you. Okay, let's get to a couple of questions. Obviously, if anybody has a question, please just type it in the Q&A bar or tool and we'll get to it. But here's one from Andrew. Can someone speak to the role that cloud seeding plays in the broader snowpack aridification fuels and water availability discussion as it relates to fire strategies?
I can touch upon it. I don't know a whole lot. I know around Lake Tahoe there was kind of pilot cloud seeding project that was happening a while ago, but I think it was actually through University of Nevada, Reno at some point, or it might have been UC Davis. But that kind of pilot project, seems to have kind of gone to the wayside. So I don't see a lot of kind of active, a lot of active efforts in that area. Others might know more, but I know it was something that was maybe kind of more faith or confidence was put into it about a decade ago, and it seems to kind of have gone to the wayside.
Yeah, same traffic, Jan. That was our experience. I think it was Desert Research Institute we partnered up with, but that was a while back, so no current information, but good question.
I have a question. Obviously we work with a lot of large mountain communities, but many more smaller ones, obviously with limited budgets, especially after the winter that we just had. How can a smaller mountain community really start to think about attacking wildfire resiliency and mitigation at scale with obviously a limited budget or limited capacity? Where would they start?
I think you try to find examples of what has worked for others, and then you learn what their scale is, and you scale it down to the resources that you have. From a electric utility perspective, that's what we did. We look at what other people are doing, and then we try to scale it to the way it fits for our budgets, our systems, and our scenario.
Thank you, Cody.
I would kind of echo that. We are a larger operator in the grand scheme of resorts. I've been fortunate to work with smaller ones, but I think Jan touched on it earlier, and we're in the same boat. Is there's a lot of organizations, both private and public, that are out there willing to help with this stuff. And I think, you have the right people, whether they're in your sustainability teams or in your operations teams, that as soon as you ask the question, and especially when you're talking about, creating a better, healthy environment out there in these communities, whether it's a small mountain community or a large one, they're all significantly loved, and they're all pretty beautiful. And I think there's a lot of help that's out there. We've been so fortunate with our Ball Mountain Stewardship Project to have a ton of help from agencies and federal funding. But I know, being involved in all of our community outreach groups here, that there's a lot of small companies that are looking always, and nonprofits, to give money to projects like this. And I think for those smaller operators that are really money constricted, just going out and asking the question, and I'm sure there's going to be resources. It might take a little bit of legwork and some writing and some contracts, but there's a lot of resources out there to help us with this type of work specifically.
Thank you. Obviously, that's kind of the model that everyone here at Mountain Towns 2030 is following, this model of collaboration, because obviously there's so many communities and utilities that are doing really good work like you all. And to be able to kind of see what you're doing and replicate it just saves time and money. So we're going to, at our upcoming climate summit, which is going to be in Sun Valley in October, we're going to be talking about wildfire quite a bit. And profiling some of the really good work that's being done in mountain communities all over the US, some of the technologies that are working, like frontline wildfire defense and Pano and BurnBot, some of the really good work and the innovations that are coming out of this issue right now. So even the smaller mountain communities can kind of build that peer network and those colleagues that they can lean on when they really need some help. So hopefully for everybody on the call, if you haven't signed up for our summit yet, please do come. I don't see any other questions. If you have any others, please type them in. Does anybody have any other last thoughts before we wrap this up?
Chris, I see a few ones here in the chat.
Oh, in the chat. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Oh, got it. Okay. Hold on one sec. Thank you, Jan. Ski resorts are often major owners of housing in the local town. What are you doing to harden the residences you own? It's a good question.
I can give some perspective on that. A couple things for us. Kirkwood's a pretty small valley with a fairly small community, but very passionate. We have a number of HOAs that we work closely with and partner with. We have employee housing in the valley as well. And then we have 2 conservation easements, one in our meadow and then one adjacent to the ski area and the west side. And I think it is that collaboration and partnership. Post Caldor, the Firewise presence has become very popular here. And then I have a member from our senior team that partners up with that Firewise community. And it goes back to the partnerships and the planning and the preparation and working together. And that's our approach for taking care of our space, defensible space around all of our lodges, our lift infrastructure, but then asking the same in return in the community.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say for us over at Sun Valley, it's the simple things that we do that go a long way for our neighbors. Often we have these large parking lots that we can let go in the summertime when nobody's using them. And for us, a big thing that we take pride in and do the best we can is keeping fuels at bay. So keeping those tall grasses mowed down, keeping the face fenceable for all of our adjacent property owners. That's kind of one thing we focus on. We don't have too much housing that's not in our core, that's well protected in a big valley. But when we talk over at the mountain, we just try to focus on being the best neighbor that we can and not letting fuels and other things get out of hand on property boundaries. If we're a good neighbor, they're a good neighbor in return.
Thanks, John. Cody, this is a question probably for you. Which AI cameras are you using?
We use the Pano AI. That's the system in both of our valleys currently.
Got it. Thank you. Here's a question for both your utility and the resorts. How are you approaching more distributed energy resilience via backup generation energy storage to allow for emergency operations in the event of an outage?
I'll take the first shot at that from the utility side. We have a solar plus storage program here in our utility, so people can participate in that. That's one way to do it. But I think really it depends on what you're trying to provide backup power for. Obviously certain types of loads, a battery might not lend itself very well to providing backup power to that. So really you just got to figure that out from that perspective. But in general, if you're just talking about a standard building and some lighting and generalized heating and cooling, a sufficient solar plus storage system can generally provide backup power for a reasonable amount of time.
Thank you.
We've been spending some time on kind of how do we innovate in this area as well, and not even within the mountain context, but we've run into some issues with local agencies about their willingness relative to their willingness to accept battery storage as an adequate backup power. To happen in kind of more urban environment where, despite case studies from other markets, fire agencies and city agencies were not willing to essentially replace generators with battery storage as a fire life safety backup, which is unfortunate. And so one of the challenges here that we see is just kind of evolution of code and compliance that will allow us to innovate quicker.
Thank you, Jan.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I know I mentioned the Heavenly experience before with snowmaking and then that close relationship with the providers. Kirkwood's different in that we were off the grid until around 2013 when we did an Out Valley power project going west down Highway 88. But we are lucky to have a great backup power source in generators. And then at the top of the mountain where a lot of our communications, both for resort and county partnerships with law enforcement, those ski patrol stations are off the grid. So we've got solar panels and battery banks in there, which we found are a good tool in a situation when needed.
Amazing. Thank you. I think I don't see any other questions yet. So in the meantime, I just want to thank you all for being here. Jan, Ricky, Cody, John, thank you very much for being here. And thank you all for being here today. I want to send a special thanks to Jason Brooks from Fireside and Amy Berry from the Tahoe Fund for helping us put together this series of wildfire conversations. They've been really well attended, and I hope they've been valuable for you all. It's obviously wildfire season, and it's never too late to have these conversations. So thank you all for being here. I will share everyone's contact information. So again, going back to that idea of leaning on somebody who's doing the good work, please feel free to reach out to anybody on this call. Hopefully it's okay with you guys, in case you are finding something challenging or you need some advice, because that's how we're going to accelerate the progress on this really urgent issue. And again, we'll be in Sun Valley on October 13th and 14th for the MT 2030 Climate Summit. We're going to have a big part of it is a wildfire conversation. So please feel free to join. There'll be Pano will be there, BurnBot will be there, Frontline Wildfire Defense will be there, as will experts from a number of agencies and local fire departments. So I hope you all can join. Again, well, thank you very much for being here, and we will hopefully see you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.